Welcome to another exciting and inviting, informative and performative episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, the place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. And I do have the entrepreneur of entrepreneurs, the multidisciplinary entrepreneur on the podcast today. But before we bring him up, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by Shield Wolf Strongholds, a wealth growth and protection company. When it comes to estate planning, when it comes to life insurance, when it comes to employee benefits, when it comes to retirement planning, if your plan ain't Shield Wolf, your plan ain't strong. If you are a business owner that wants you and your employees to retire higher than you would have prior, make sure you visit shieldwolfstrong.com or call or text +1 904 822 4262. Now to our guest. Our guest today is Chris Papin, CPA, attorney, and author of 168 Hours, a startup business guide that respects your time. Chris also hosts the BLABO Podcast, BLABO Podcast, teaching business owners to behave like a business owner, not just employees who happen to own companies. His approach is simple. Everyone has 168 hours each week, but successful business owners use those hours differently. They stop doing what's comfortable and start doing what's necessary. Chris, welcome to the Entreprenudist Podcast.
My man, I'm happy to be back. Thank you. That was a good intro.
Absolutely, man. You know, I get better every time, man. And it seems like you do as well. I've been seeing. I was honored to be a guest on one of your episodes, and every time I log onto LinkedIn, you are ingrained in the algorithm. How's that been going for you?
Things are doing well. We've had some great responses. We've had wonderful guests like you that are good personalities, have a following. Probably the thing that I've gotten the most value out of is as I've sat down and played a different role rather than representing a client or being across the desk trying to achieve a goal. I'm just listening. Mm-hmm. And I've learned an immense amount from some really, really talented people as I've gone, which is special, which I think you warned me was going to happen when we did your first episode together.
Absolutely.
Wise man. You are a wise man.
I appreciate it. I still remember the first time somebody called me wise. I was 4 years old. What they said? No, they called me an old soul. But from what I've determined is typically when somebody calls you an old soul, that's just a roundabout way of calling you wise. And my mother is very religious. It was something called Jubilee. I think it has something to do with every 50 years. And apparently whatever you ask for during that time you get. All I asked for was wisdom. So and you know, it typically works out, man. You know, and I know I've asked you this before when it comes to what you're doing, but is there nothing that you know now that you wish you knew when you first started doing this podcast that you're doing, BLABO?
You know, it's interesting because on the surface, I would not go back and change anything because I think the learning curve and some of the you know, bouncing off the curbs is a healthy exercise. But my biggest fear and the thing that I worried the most about was, are we going to create content that people will consume? I knew that the conversations I had with people and clients and all that stuff were things that other people crave, but how do you get that into a concise format? And fast forward, now we're at a place where, yes, it is something that people will consume. We've gotten a lot of feedback inside the bubble and outside the bubble about kind of the raw version of stuff. And that, again, this is, you know, I'm not unique in this. This is what you do too, but being vulnerable, showing failures along the way, talking about how you learn from the failures, you know, people crave that, but I just needed to see the buy-in. So there's kind of this, like, if I could go back in time and absolutely know that the topics would gain traction and that we'd have runway, I would probably feel much more comfortable about going through it. But I think being present in that discomfort has kind of made it what made it. So no, I wouldn't change it. But but that's what I would want to know.
Yes. Knowing that you're putting out a product worth consuming, and just the simple act of consumption isn't necessarily enough. I've seen a show where there's people out there eating chalk, right? And now you got to determine, all right, is this fat, is this protein, or is this complex or simple carbs, right? And one of the thing about setting out to make your audience being business owners, you're not going to I'm not going to say you're not going to, and at the very least starting out, and there's a very small percentage, you're not going to be getting hundreds of thousands of downloads, but the quality over quantity of the listeners are very, 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 very nutritious. Have you discovered that?
We have, and I like the way you put that, because yes, I'm not creating, your next Netflix streaming special, and I recognize that, but I'm speaking to an audience, and I'm speaking on things that this includes you, we talk to our people about every day. People are looking to build wealth. They're looking for the easy strategies they can take home and enrich their lives, or go home an hour earlier, or spend less money, whatever it is. But it's all about kind of aligning and getting those thought juices flowing, if you will, because it's hard, especially when it's something like we talked about on a last episode, but like when people exit their business, and this is something you spend a lot of time with folks on, like creating that liquidity moment. They do it once. We do it multiple times. And it's a different conversation to say, hey, guess what? I've been down this road, and about 40 feet down this road, there's going to be a crack. Please don't trip on it. And once we get on the other side of the crack, there's going to be a little bit of an incline. So we're going to have to work hard. But being able to walk people through that really brings peace and comfort. And then the thing that I find the most enriching is as I'm getting feedback back from particularly our client base, just because I'm closer to them, I'm getting things like, hey, I didn't know you knew anything about that. Could we have other conversations? And you're going, all right, we've hit the mark. I'm curious on your side. I assume you've run into the same kind of deal. Like as you start going down a path with the guest, or even at some of the keynotes that you give, people start to hear something that maybe they didn't think you were or didn't know you knew anything about, and then they perk up. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah. I mean, and when you have a show called Entreprenudist, when you say perk up, you got to be very specific of what you're talking about. But yeah, absolutely, man. It's one thing that you discover is that people get more and more close to you. Because here's the thing, I have a lot of triggers. I think you might be in my my email and text message list, but I have a lot of triggers to where I see, people when they click on links and what they consume and what they don't. And what I noticed is a lot of people are clicking on it, and because I'm so into the numbers, I see the people who are clicking. But when I have my events, I do regular events here in Jacksonville, Florida. When I have my events, they never bring it up. Like they don't just I'm trying to, what's the best way to put it? They don't just like bring it up like just in a meeting. But when we're out, all of a sudden they start mentioning things that I know that they could have only known had they been consuming this extracurricular activity of mine, this podcast. So and so it makes them closer to me. It makes them know extra things that I know about, and it also for me, it's more so meeting people like you, because it's no secret. One of the best ways to get on somebody's good side is to make the conversation mostly about them. And as a host, you get the opportunity to do that, especially with your preferred referral sources.
Yeah. No, so and you're onto something there. I've got another question for you, just because I'm honestly curious. When you
Where do babies come from?
Yeah, let's go there.
Well, it's a stork, right? All right.
I thought it was dollar bills. I thought you impregnated dollar bills. No, so on the real side though, like when you host your events and you're the guy on the stage, how do you get the audience to talk about themselves or engage themselves in that?
Well, so I use something from Chris Voss. He has a book called Never Split the Difference. He's a former FBI negotiator, and he has something where he uses tactical empathy and mirroring. So what I did was I combined his tactical empathy and mirroring to a concept called FORD, family, occupation, recreation, dreams. So throughout the engagement for the night, I'm asking people about their family. Well, and when you're dealing with a networking event, most people stick to the occupation side of things. And majority of the conversation has to do with occupation. But I'm typically the only person, if not one of few, that talks about what they do for recreation, that talks about their family, that talks about what their ultimate goals are outside of this business. What are they doing all this? And when they respond, I mirror, which is at its simplest form, repeating the last 2 to 3 words of what they say, or just like in school, you know, when you were doing like I don't know if they still do this, the SATs, the ACTs and all that, but you would have to figure out what the main idea of this paragraph was. And when you first started learning it, the main idea was usually always the first sentence or the last sentence. But as you started getting more complex, then the main idea might be buried somewhere in the middle of the paragraph. So at its simplest form, you repeat the last 2 to 3 words of what they say, that's mirroring. And then when the conversation starts slowing down, you hit them with a seems like, looks like, sounds like, tactical empathy, which shows a person that you're listening to. But because you prefaced it with seems like, looks like, sounds like, it gives them the opportunity to correct you. And then some people might say, well, that's cheating. That's not a real conversation. I challenge anybody to listen for the last 2 to 3 words of every conversation that they're in. You're listening harder than you've ever listened in your life. A lot of people have been in that situation to where they're having a conversation with somebody, and then that person forgets what they're saying. And they say, "What was I saying?" You be like, you legitimately and sincerely have no idea what they were saying. But if you're actively listening for the last 2 to 3 words of what they're saying so that you can mirror effectively and then use tactical empathy whenever the conversation starts to slow down, you will find that if and when that ever happens where that person forgets what they were saying, you'll be able to catch them up from the beginning of the conversation to the end. So that's how I encourage people and do that in my events and get that goodwill out of them. So, you know, and then here's the thing. Some people say, and I like how you turned my podcast on me, Chris. You got me doing all. I know what you do, man. I study you, Mr. Papin. All right. But so what I do is, okay, a majority, if not that entire night, I spent that time talking about them. It's at the end of the night, that's when I send them my capability statement. So now we had a great conversation. We talked about their family. We talked about their occupation. We talked about what they do for recreation. We talked about their dreams. And then by the end of the night, they were like, "Oh, that was a great conversation, but I know nothing about Randolph." Then all of a sudden, bling, my capability statement is there. So now they know what I do. They know my differentiators. They know all of that stuff. So that's how I implement it. How do you capitalize on these conversations that you're having on your podcast?
Yeah, so basically this boils down into a couple of different forms. So when it's one-on-one, it's a whole lot easier because you can actively listen, talk about, you know, in our conversation here, you know, you've got some active listening skills, you have some mirroring that you have to implement, and you have tactical empathy. Okay. Mm-hmm. I just did what you asked me to do, right? Easy to do on one-on-one. When you get in front of the larger audiences, and this is kind of the way I think of the podcast. Yes, I'm talking to a person, but indirectly we're talking to everybody, right? Mm-hmm. I try to distill things back down through kind of my host's lens. For example, I heard you say tactical empathy, but I don't know what tactics are. So walk me through 2 or 3 steps there where I'm asking the question I think the audience would want to hear. And then one other thing, and this is kind of more public speaking, and this always matters, like the room setup. Are you mic'd up, or do you have to yell at the room, or do you have visuals? How many people are in the audience? Like, we've all been part of the big giant room and nobody showed up, and vice versa. You got standing room only. But pay attention and read your people. If you're talking at them, they're gonna, for those that are on video, like I got my hand on my they're falling asleep, right? Their head's nodding. Or can you do things to shake the tree, get them engaged, make them laugh? Like we're teasing about impregnating a dollar bill or the stork showing up, or I don't know. I mean, I guess if you watch Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift, we might know one day. But I said something, right? But these are the things you got to do to kind of suck people back in. Why on earth is Papin talking about football or music? I don't know, because it's fun. Sometimes you got to create the hook or create the silly, or the one I used. I was in a continuing education event, and I could just tell everybody in the room just are checked out. And we were talking about estate planning, and I got to a point. This is after lunch; people are going to sleep, and I said, "You know what? I'm just going to shortcut to the punchline: cocaine and hookers." And everybody in the room snaps their head at me. And I was like, okay, now that I have your attention, I'm pretty sure when you put together your wealth plan and you leave money to your family, you don't want your kids blowing it on cocaine and hookers. And everybody in the room is like, oh yeah, no, we don't want that. So
unless they're blowing cocaine on hookers.
If that's your thing, man, all the power to you.
Oh yeah, you gotta get it going, because that's how I do it. With the humor, right? Yeah. And the stories. What they say, data tells, stories sell, which brings us to your book, that 168 hours. How do you talk to the left side of the brain, and how do you talk to the right side of the brain in this book? It's built on the fundamentals of a business plan. So that, this is not life-changing stuff. Guess what? If you're in a business, you got to advertise. Guess what? If you're in a business, you got to execute. You got to collect money. You got to sell. There's all these things that are at play. But the thing that is important is I try to make a lot of analogy back to athletics. And in business, we don't always know the objective. In athletics, we do. If you're playing basketball, you score more points than the other team, and you try not to foul more than 6 times. You stay on the court, you score more points, generally you win. So in business, it's different. Sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about growth. Sometimes it's about taking care of people. Sometimes it's about volume. Sometimes it's quantity over quality, or quality over quantity. And the only person in the room that's going to define that is the business owner. And that's really what I want people to go back through, is identify what's important to you. Focus on the key elements that impact that importance. No different than your wealth planning. Our goal is to retire by, cool. What are the things we need to do between now and 50 to get you retired by 50? And you can start to kind of see the path. And then at the end of the day, the big punchline here, nobody's going to do it for you. So you have to lean in, because what I think most business owners like to do are the easy things, or the things that they're good at. I'd love to be on podcasts all day, every day. You and I could just goof off and have a whole lot of fun, but that's not what makes all of the money. There's other components we got to go do too. And those other components matter just as much, even if you're not the one that excels at them. Whether you hire it out, or sometimes you just got to put your head down and figure it out. A lot of clients tell me, I don't like the administrative, the numbers, the invoicing, the billing, the collections. Who wants to call their client and say, hey, did you forget to pay me? Nobody wants to do that. That's not fun. But those are the necessary things that keep businesses alive. And I think
take the analogy for whatever it may be, but the best singers, the best athletes, the best businesses, the best business owners, we all have 168 hours in a week. How SGA uses his time as the MVP in the league against the new rookie Cooper Flagg might be two different things. They may be exactly the same, but it's two different people applying two different skill sets. And you've got to customize that to you to achieve the level of success that you're going to work at. Because I think everybody recognizes Cooper Flagg will be successful. At what level? We don't know. He's willing to put in the work. SGA was once in Cooper Flagg's shoes. He was the young up-and-comer losing all the games. And that's the way I want business owners to kind of think about their own business. Are you willing to put in the work that gets you to that end objective? Not everybody's going to win the title. I get that. Not everybody's going to make millions and millions of dollars. Some people are going to get sued. Some are going to file bankruptcy. But if you do the statistical likelihood things for success, you start trending on that bell curve towards the success side. That's it. It's that simple.
And just for people that's unfamiliar, because I know one of the things that allow people to trend on to success is making sure that they have the right supporting staff. And I know the way that you approach things is a multidisciplinary firm. Some people call it a family office, right? How would you advise business owners engage multidisciplinary offices like yours in order to make their 168 hours the most effective?
Yeah, I appreciate the softball here. I mean, this is an awesome question for a lot of layers. And I think business owners have to recognize there's so many of these different areas that you're playing in. If you have a natural aptitude for, say, compliance, then maybe you can focus more on compliance and you can shift away from those other marketing-based things. But then you need to deploy your external resources to those skill sets that you have deficiencies. And this is where people can collaborate. You can outsource, you can hire, whatever it may be. What I find with a lot of startups is they don't know where to begin. They know they need an entity. They don't know how to their tax. They don't know how to structure their finances. They don't know what employee benefits to offer. We don't know how much money needs to be in the business account to be healthy. So you kind of need this attorney, CPA, financial bubble to all come together. And there's a business side of the house. There's a personal side of the house. The question that came up this week that I think will hit home for the audience, but a brand new business owner calls me and says, "Hey, I created my LLC. I don't know what to do next. I need help. I heard I need to have 90 days cash." And I said, "Okay, where'd you hear that?" He said, "I don't know. It's just like a rule of thumb." I said, "Do you know where it comes from?" "No, I have no idea." I'm like, "Okay, well, do you have disability insurance?" "What's that?" And as we walked through a lot of things, he's borrowing all these templates and he knew a lot of things, but he didn't know why. And that's where the role of these different advisors like Randolph and I can sit next to you and fill in that gap as to why, because he did have the fundamentals that were correct. What he didn't have is the disability insurance policy to replace his income in the event he was injured. He had his 90 days cash savings, but I was like, "Man, that's awesome. What do you do at day 91? It's like, "I don't know." Okay, well, let's have the rest of that conversation. In his space, he thinks he's going to be able to create multiple locations and sell them. You know anything about that stuff? And of course, he didn't understand what he needed in cash flow. So to set that up, to create this franchise type model and to exit, but not know how to operate your bank accounts, oh my gosh. So we've got a great relationship budding, but he needs that mentorship and that guidance. He'll figure it out. Confident young man and the go-getter of all go-getters. But you've lived in this space, right? There's all these people that want to exit but haven't set themselves up to exit. Or they have a great idea. They're trying to build out some sort of franchise model, but they don't have the systems documented to be able to scale. That's where folks, and I know I've said a lot of things in this, but there's so many things when you don't know how to do it, You can ask the question and say how. Well, if it's hard for you to execute, that's what you go outsource. That's what you go partner with people on. And obviously is the juice worth the squeeze? I understand the value proposition that's there, but certain professionals are a must. I would challenge as an attorney, double negative, yes, I know, but you can't not get your legal house in order. If you don't, everything is at risk. That's the whole reason the entity exists. Most business owners say, oh my God, I had no idea that was going to be a thing, Chris. Help me fix it. You're going, okay, easy fix. But if you do it right, it's a whole lot cheaper than fixing it, guys. So again, all kinds of good stuff. I can go on and on and on. I don't want to be that guy, but it's the perfect example of this guy starting somewhere. We both know where he's going to land and we know the common pitfalls. Let's help make that process easier. Let's give him the shortcuts. Let's warn him about the incline that we're about to go on.
And it's ironic that you mentioned disability insurance. Somebody challenged me on that today. They asked me, all right, what's your disability insurance business looking like? And I know the numbers. People are more likely to be out of work for a prolonged period of time than they are to die prematurely. 1 in 4, in fact. I know the numbers, but yeah, I think that's a conversation that should be had a lot, because yes, it's one thing to know what you're supposed to do, and it's another thing to know why. And it sounds like what you're doing is you lead with education, whereas somebody, like, for example, in that same scenario, that person could have said, oh yeah, I heard that I needed to have 3 months cash savings. You could have said, all right, yes, you can, and what we'll do to help supplement that is get you disability insurance. You led with the question first. And I forget what that principle is, to where you make people try to think of what it is first, and then you correct them. I forget the name of that principle, but it seems like that's what you employ.
So I know it as the Socratic method, which is what comes out of law school. You lead by question. Socrates had this philosophy from way back when, right? We still use it today. But there's a lot of different ways to boil that down. But the ultimate, just out of creativity, like influence on people, there's probably a more aggressive term that I could use there in a different environment, but is to get somebody else to think of the idea you're trying to get them to, because there's no better result than when it's their idea. But that's where the why comes from, because usually it's not a new idea, and it's usually not something you're forcing someone to want. It's they haven't realized the different variables that are at play. So the running joke is nobody wants a minivan. This is the one we use internally. Literally nobody wants a minivan. They're like, oh my gosh, why would I have a minivan? Right up until you have 4 or 5 kids. Then you want the minivan. The doors open on their own. The doors close on their own. You got all the tech and all the entertainment. Where are you in the life cycle? What is it that's important to you? What are we focusing on? All right. Once we're aligned, then it's an easy conversation to kind of execute towards the next steps. And yes, lead with education so people understand the things that maybe, AI or their friends or their neighbor forget to tell them. Because we're all guilty of, I heard that somewhere. I'm not really sure why. It matters.
What books should people be reading?
So this one is not actually a business book, but there is one called The Precious Present. Super easy read, but the whole premise about it is it a gift present, or are we talking about a time present today? And I think that one is good to kind of help keep priorities aligned. Another one is The Entrepreneurial Myth. I like it because it gives people a vocabulary set. There's a technician, there's a manager, and there's an entrepreneur's personality in there. And most people gravitate to one of those three, but they have some really cool stories about, I am a technician and I don't like to do sales and advertising because I just want to lock myself in a room and do A, B, and C. Well, you got to do all the things in a business. And then of course, 168 hours, right?
Another softball for you, sir. Okay. All right. What is your definition of success?
As a good attorney always says, it depends.
It depends.
So in all honesty, if I am being asked what is success, there's three key elements for me. There's a business piece, there's a personal element, and then there's a community element. And if you get that recipe right, all benefit from what you're doing. And to me, that defines success. It's not about every dollar. It's not about all the time at home and never working or anything like that. But it also encompasses those around me, my community, what other influence, how can I prop other people up and allow them to succeed too. I realize that changes for every person, but those are my three components of the recipe.
Oh yeah. They say you can line up 100 successful people and ask them what their definition of success is, and they'll all give you a different answer. But failure is always described the same way. Failure is man's inability to accomplish their goals, whatever they may be, right? Is there not a question that I did not ask you that I should have?
So I just no, but I'm going to build on this other side of things. I'll close with kind of how people can chase me down. But your point about failure, man's inability to achieve. If you stop, you prove failure. If you keep going, keep trying, eventually there's success. You may not always figure it out, but pay attention to that because there's truth inside of that. And it's all in the definition.
I have a funny analogy that I came across recently, right? And the analogy was, if somebody were to walk into your room and catch you jacking off, if you stop immediately, it's embarrassing to you. But if you keep going and look them in their eyes, it becomes embarrassing to them. That's how you have to treat your dreams. That's how you have to treat your goals. You have to keep going, because if you stop, that's embarrassing. But if you keep going, you want the people who doubted you, who did not believe in you, to be embarrassed that they never believed in you in the first place.
I never dreamed that's what I was going to hear, but is it true? That's a really good one. That's funny.
Oh, yeah. One more time, Chris, let everybody know who you are, what do you do, and how they can get in touch.
Yeah, Chris Papin. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on papinspeaks.com. Attorney, CPA, representing small businesses, small business owners. Most importantly, go chase down that book, 168 Hours. You'll find it on our website, papinspeaks.com, and on Amazon.
Thank you so much, Chris. This has been another amazing episode of the Entreprenudist Podcast, a place to hear real entrepreneurs and business owners bear it all. I'm your host, Randolph Love III. And until next time, don't play with it, stay with it until you make pay with it. This is the Entreprenudist Podcast, signing off.